It's the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 28, looking at the groups and teams of the 2024 Copa America. This episode is looking at the players of Argentina. Here we go! Hello and welcome again to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin, and we continue Series 28 on the groups and players of the 2024 Copa America. This episode covers Argentina's players and is in fact part 2 of the Player Mediacast. Here we look at the selections. In part 1, we made a list of the candidates and introduced them and their likelihood of making the squad. And there is a link to that, part 1, in the show notes. This episode will be divided into 3 sections. In section 1, we'll take a quick look at the preliminary squad situation and their warm-up games. In section 2, the main part of the mediacast, we look over the list that we compiled in part 1 to see who made it and who didn't. And in section 3, we summarize surprises in the selection and review injuries. So let's move on to part 1 and some general information here on the preliminary squad and on the warm-up games. So actually, Argentina did not put out a preliminary squad on June 15th, so not long before the tournament and after their warm-up games. They just put out a 26-man final squad. So no last-minute changes either. Some teams did have to make last-minute changes, but not Argentina. Again, because they put the squad out quite late there after the warm-up games. Let's take a look at the warm-up games. On June 9th, they played Ecuador. That was in the USA. And June 14th against Guatemala, also in the USA. And we're not really interested in the scores there. They beat Guatemala 4-1, just for your information. And they beat Ecuador 1-0. We're more interested, though, in the lineups that they put out. So the lineup against Ecuador was partly a B team. There were a couple of players who we think are starters on the field, but the second one looked more like the starting lineup we expected to see. Anyway, we will kind of mention that as we go through who was selected for those games. So let's get right down to our main order of business, the selection of candidates. So we begin with manager Lionel Scaloni, and we will say that he was selected for the squad because he wasn't dismissed or anything before the tournament. And on to goalkeepers, we had a definite candidate in Emiliano Martinez, and he was selected. And then we had 2 likely candidates in Franco Armani. He was selected, and in Walter Benitez. Walter Benitez, though, despite being likely, was not selected, and nor was the possible but unlikely Juan Musso. It was the player after him, Geronimo Rulli, who was selected for the final squad. So a bit of a surprise there. And there are our 3 keepers, Emiliano Martinez, Franco Armani, and Geronimo Rulli. On to central defense. Oh, and I'll just say that Emiliano Martinez started both of the warm-up games there. On to central defense, and we have 2 definite candidates in Christian Romero and Nicolas Otamendi. Both of those were selected for the final squad. And we have likely candidate German Pazelli. German Pazelli was selected. Down to the possible candidates, Lisandro Martinez was selected. However, the other possible candidate, Nicolas Valentini, not selected for the squad. Instead, one of our possible but unlikely candidates was selected. That is Lucas Martinez Corta. So kind of taking the position that we expected Valentini to get. The other player who was possible but unlikely was Marco Senesi, and he was not selected for the squad. In terms of the starters, Lisandro Martinez started both of the games. Alongside the two players who we consider to be the starters. It was Christian Romero in the first game and Nicolas Otamendi in the second game. So we don't know if this heralds a change, that they're thinking of Lisandro Martinez as a starter there. But we would be inclined to think that it's still Romero and Otamendi as the starters, and they were just giving Martinez some field time there. We're not sure, though. On to left backs, and we have a definite candidate in Nicolas Tagliafico, who was selected. And the first of our possible candidates, Marcos Acuna, was selected. The other possible candidate was Valentin Barco, and he was not selected, and nor was the possible but unlikely Facundo Medina. Let's look at the warm-up games and see who started. So it was Acuna, who we consider the backup, and that's a bit in line with the first game being something of a B-team game. In the second game, we would have expected Tagliafico, but no, it is Nicolas Gonzalez. He's coded as a forward. We moved him to the position of left attacker. However, he had played once as a left back. That was in their second last game, the first game in March, which was an experimental friendly against El Salvador. But we certainly didn't expect to see him here. And again, we wonder if that is signaling some kind of a change, or if there's a problem with Tagliafico. We're not sure. But we had Tagliafico as the starter in part one, as the player who we thought would be the starter. We were quite confident about it too. Anyway, we'll see what they do in the Cup. Meanwhile, we'll move on to the right back position, and we had a definite candidate with Nahuel Molina. He did have an injury tag on him, which we'll talk about at the end, but he seems to have overcome that, at least enough to be selected for the squad. Next, we have two possible candidates, the first of whom, Gonzalo Montiel, was selected, and the second, Nahuen Perez, not selected, and nor was possible but unlikely candidate Juan Foyth. So in the warm-up games there, it was Montiel, again the backup in the first game, and the player we thought would be the starter in the second game there. Okay, on to the central midfield, and we begin with, well, I was about to say defensive midfielders, but they don't have any. So on to central midfielders. We begin with Enzo Fernandez, a definite candidate. He was selected, but he had gone for groin surgery in late April. He was due back on May 31st and is back, so we presume he's over that injury. And the other definite candidate was Leandro Paredes, who was selected for the squad. We had a likely candidate in Guido Rodriguez, who was selected, and one possible candidate, Ezekiel Palacios, also selected for the squad. So all four of the central midfielders we had were listed, and we're going to actually do left and right midfielders too, because they played a 4-3-3 in the first game, which does have a left and right midfielder, but they played a 4-4-2 in the second game, which does not, and some of these players show up. So just a moment here. Okay, so the left midfielders, we had a definite candidate in Alexis McAllister, and he was selected, and also likely candidate Giovanni Lo Celso was selected. Over on the right side, we had a definite candidate in Rodrigo de Paul. He was the only candidate in this category, and all three of them were selected. So we have a bunch of players here, and we'll look at who was selected. So in the 4-3-3, it was Paredes. in the middle, our definite central midfielder, with Lo Celso on left midfield and DePaul on right midfield. So again, all three of those players we regard more as B team players. However, Lo Celso did show up in the next game. He came in as a left winger, so he played both games. But the central midfield looks more like we expected to be in the Cup. It was McAllister and Enzo Fernandez in a pairing in a two-man central midfield. And we'll talk about the winger position right away here. As we move upfield, we include the winger position in a situation like a 4-4-2 when it's an attacking winger rather than a left back or right back moving up. So left attackers could be a winger like this. It could be a left attacking midfielder, or it could be a left forward like in the 4-4-3 of game one. So our candidates are Nicolas Gonzalez. So we saw that he started as a left back in the first game, but he was, of course, selected. And two possible candidates here, Alejandro Garnacho, who was selected, and Lucas Ocampos, who was not chosen for the squad. And left attacking midfield, actually, none of these players, well, Gonzalez starting as a left back, but otherwise it was Lo Celso as a winger in game one, and forward Julian Alvarez as a left forward in game two there. Let's see about the right side. We moved Lionel Messi as a definite candidate on the right because that's where he played more. He plays as a forward too. And he was the only candidate on this side, or the only viable candidate. However, he didn't start either of the games. And, oh, sorry, he did. He started game two, a two-man forward line, and he was on the right side. He scored 2 goals as well against Guatemala there. So Lionel Messi, again, that second game looking more like the starting lineup, and the first game more like a B-team game. Okay, on to central attackers, and we have a definite candidate in Angel Di Maria. Sorry, that is not a definite, a likely candidate. He was selected, and we had 3 possible candidates. The first one was Thiago Almada. He was not selected, and an injury may have played a role in that. We'll talk about that in the last section. Valentina Carboni was selected, and Facundo Buonanotte was not selected. So Carboni getting the nod amongst those 3. We also had a possible but unlikely candidate in Angel Correa, who was not selected. On the right side, we had actually Carboni starting the second game there as a right winger. And in the first game, it was Angel Di Maria as a right forward. However, we do think Angel Di Maria is a more likely starter than Carboni. Okay, on to forwards, and we have a definite candidate in Julian Alvarez, and he was selected. A likely candidate in Lautaro Martinez, and he too was selected. And that's it. We had a possible but unlikely candidate in Paulo Dybala, who was not selected for the squad. In terms of the warm-up games, Julian Alvarez started as a left forward in game one, and Lautaro Martinez as the center forward in that 3-man forward line. In the second game, Lautaro Martinez started alongside Messi there. So Lautaro Martinez getting both starts there, although we had considered Julian Alvarez a more likely starter than him. Okay, that is it for our look at the players. So we move on to section 3 and our review of the surprises, and we begin with notable non-selections. Actually, not many, just the goalkeeper Walter Benitez. We had considered him a likely candidate, and he was not selected for the squad. Rather, we have the first surprise inclusion, Geronimo Rulli taking his spot. So bit of a surprise there. Rulli was a backup keeper in the 2022 World Cup, whereas Benitez had never been involved in a tournament. But we were judging on participation since the World Cup. And so, yeah, not a shocker, but a surprise there. The other surprise was the central defender, Lucas Martinez Quarta, taking the spot again ahead of more likely players, although he had been selected for the 2021 Copa America. Martinez Quarta, he started actually in that tournament, but lost his starting position after game one, and he was only selected for the preliminary squad in World Cup 2022, but he's back. So I don't think we introduced possible but unlikely players, so I'll just say quickly, he's 28 years old. Martinez Quarta has been with Argentina since 2019 with 12 caps and no goals, and plays for Fiorentina in Italy since 2020. All right, the third part here of the surprises is new players. So no new players added to the squad for Argentina. All of the players are on our list, and that's not surprising for a team that was so successful. They're number one in the world and just won the World Cup. So why would you make a lot of changes? Let's look at the injury situation. We have a couple of players who seem to be recovered from injury, beginning with the right back, Nahuel Molina. He was out with a muscle injury since mid-May and had been an unknown return date when we did part one. But he was selected for the squad, so is at least fit enough for that. And did appear in the warm-up games too, so seems to be over his injury. He appeared in the second warm-up game. Enzo Fernandez was out for groin surgery in late April. There had been a return date of May 31st, so as we said, he did make it back for that, and he did also start the second game there, so seems to be no problem there. We don't have any players dropped due to injury or any major players, but we do have one who was not a strong candidate. We only had him at the possible level. That was Thiago Almada. He is out with a calf injury and an unknown return date. We don't know if that injury was the main reason he wasn't selected, or whether he would have been selected otherwise. Nevertheless, the injury seems to have played a role, and Thiago Almada not part of the squad here. Okay, that brings us to the end of part two and our look at Argentina. So we hope growing more familiar with the players makes it more interesting for you to watch and enjoy the Cup. We would like to thank Paul Udin and Pixabay for the wonderful background music accompanying this media cast. The piece is called Victory Epic Music.